one. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Maximum Libertarian Podcast. I am Brian, and today's podcast is former LNC chair, which is the Libertarian National Committee's chair, Dr. Jim Lark. He talks about the infighting inside the Libertarian Party, how we constantly have different disagreements and people leaving to join the Democrats and Republicans or to just quit because they're fed up with politics in general. He discussed that and some other topics come up too. So if you haven't already, please click the subscribe button, the follow button, like, share this video. Give me a comment because that helps with the algorithm when you have interaction with people. Good, bad, indifferent. I don't care. Just give us a comment if you don't mind. And, as always, just keep fighting for the things in life to keep us free, because the socialists and the communists and all these great, wonderful groups, they're on the march here in the States, and we're just laying back thinking, oh, it'll be taken care of. Bob will take care of it. Well, Bob's already quit about 2 years ago, so Bob's not going to fight for your liberty. So if you want to keep your liberty, you've got to step up and fight for it. So, do all the stuff. Follow us on X at WeAreMaxLib. And so right now we're going to switch over to Dr. Jim Lark at the Roanoke Valley Libertarians affiliate meeting on August 6th of this year. All right, here we go.
Welcome to the Roanoke Valley Libertarians meeting here in Roanoke, Virginia at Corned Beef and Company. Tonight we have our yearly special guest, Dr. James Lark. He is National Chair of the Libertarian Party nationally, and we're going to have him talk this evening. Thank you for coming on here and watching. Please drop any questions, like, and share this to your friends. Without further ado, Dr. Lark.
Well, thank you, Dean. Thank you for the introduction. I'd like to thank you and Brian for once again inviting me. I have always assumed that it's because you couldn't get anyone good for August that I have become sort of the August attraction. I've been doing this for the better part of 15 years now, and it's always a great pleasure to be able to come down and see my friends at the Roanoke Valley Libertarians. Of course, for those people who know a little something about me, I'm from Pulaski, Virginia originally, which is a little further to the southwest. So in a sense, I'm coming back to my home area by coming down here. Before I go any further, this is the first time that I can recall when I've come to a Roanoke Valley Libertarian event where two wonderful people are not present, Charles and Angel Pasley. Charles and Angel basically were the bedrock for the Roanoke Valley Libertarians for many years. They kept things going. They're just wonderful people. I actually knew them when I was working with the Libertarian Party of Illinois about 40 years ago. They are truly paladins of liberty. Charles, unfortunately, has now passed away. And I want people to realize that it's folks like Charles and Angel who really are the ones who make revolutions happen, because there's the steady people who are constantly working hard for a goal of a libertarian society, one of individual liberty and personal responsibility. So if I may, to have some friends, raise a glass to Charles and Angel. So before I come down each August, again, I become something of an institution. I asked Brian if there's something that he would like me to discuss, and given that over the past few years we've had some interesting, if you will, disagreements in the Libertarian Party, that it's not unusual in political organizations. We've seen situations where many people, good activists, have departed, and this has been going on for quite some time, actually. And so Brian asked me if I could talk about, because of my experience in the LP, I've been around since 1983. Basically, why are we in a position where we actually do have these blow-ups occasionally where we lose goodly numbers of people, including very good people, very good activists, good financial supporters. And why are we still able to survive? Why do we keep moving forward? And so I'd like to start off by saying, just showing you, by the way, how naive I was, because in 1983, I had just joined the LP. I was a visiting scholar for the summer of 1983 at the math department of the University of California in Berkeley. So I spent some time in the Bay Area. I met Pat Cox, who wrote for Reason magazine. We became friends. He invited me to cut down to Menlo Park, which is next door to Palo Alto, for a drink. And the day we got together, he had just gotten back from covering the Libertarian Party National Convention in New York City, the famous one in 1983, where there really was a big split. And he was describing what had happened, giving me sort of the quick and dirty description. And to show you just how naive I was, I said, well, wait a minute, we're all libertarians. Is there something that we disagree about that would cause such a split? Now, he didn't laugh hysterically, I suspect because he didn't want to embarrass me in front of other people, but I thought, well, what could possibly come between libertarians? What sort of arguments could we have that would cause a massive split in the Libertarian Party? I now, by the way, have figured out that, yes, these things happen. I think I now understand why. It should be noted that the Libertarian Party is, at least in my estimation, an ideological party. Our very reason for existing is to promote a particular philosophical view of how the individual relates to the state. We are looking for a society of individual liberty combined with personal responsibility. So we have, of course, every libertarian has his or her own notion about exactly what that means. But I think in general, we're looking for a society where there is an enormous degree of individual liberty, enormous degree of latitude in terms of your activities. You can do pretty much what you want as long as you don't violate the like rights. Your neighbors. You should basically be able to do what you will with your property as long as you don't harm others. Also, you must be responsible for your actions. And as an aside, this is the thing that I think really causes a lot of problems for people. They like the freedom part. They like this liberty thing when it concerns themselves. But responsibility, being responsible for your actions. For many people, well, frankly, they don't want to be responsible. And indeed, I think you can make an argument over the last 125 years, the expansion of big government in the United States at all levels has come as a flight from responsibility. So, with respect to ideological parties, because ideological parties consist of people who take ideas seriously, the party is in many cases organized to promote a particular intellectual view, a philosophical view. People who are attracted to such parties tend to take ideas pretty seriously. And as a result, it is not terribly surprising that ideologically inclined parties are going to have perhaps more arguments about in many cases intrinsic principles. How do we interpret these libertarian principles? How do they play out in the real world? So, and this is true incidentally, if you look at socialist parties, if you look at communist parties, all of these parties that are ideologically driven tend to be very fractious. Now, by the way, in the United States, Democrats and Republicans, they're very fractious too. But their battles in many cases, yes, there is an ideological component, but in many cases, the major battle is who gets power and who gets the particular cut of the action. Whereas with the Libertarian Party and many socialist parties, they're not in power. They don't have anything to divvy up, so to speak. So when we have arguments, when we have, in some cases, very nasty splits, it tends to be over ideological battles over ideas. Now, again, I've seen lots of cases where ideological parties have had nasty splits. I will say, by the way, with the Libertarian Party, at least when we have splits, by and large, you don't see dead bodies hitting the floor. Other political parties, when they have their ideological parties, when they have their splits, you actually see people getting ice picks put into the back of the heads of their opponents. The Libertarian Party, by and large, when we have splits, they're not violent, but they can be very, very bitter. Again, this shouldn't be terribly surprising because people who take ideas seriously, if they see what they consider to be a failure to observe libertarian principles, to carry out those libertarian principles, they're going to, in most cases, they're going to raise an objection. And it's not unusual, since libertarian principles can be interpreted in a wide variety of ways, to see splits that come about. And I mentioned 1983. That was probably the most well-known big split of the party. Over the last couple of years, I guess you could say actually the last 5 years, we've had, if you will, disagreements. There's the so-called Mises Caucus, and people who are not in the Mises Caucus. There have been battles, mostly over, I think, ideological issues, exactly how you interpret libertarian ideas. So we've had our battles. We've had in the Commonwealth of Virginia, we had a situation a couple of years ago where leadership of the Libertarian Party of Virginia, the leadership that was elected at a state convention, many of those leaders basically tried to collapse the Libertarian Party, which was most unfortunate. We survived, basically because those who were trying to collapse the party, frankly, I don't think they knew what they were doing. If they had actually known what they were doing, they could have caused more damage. But we've had these splits. I think libertarians, among, again, ideologically oriented people, if they are involved in partisan politics, they are more likely to leave the political party organization. But I think that's largely because libertarians, for the most part, people of libertarian disposition, don't like politics. Arguably, the biggest short-term task of the Libertarian Party is to get libertarians to join the Libertarian Party. Most people of libertarian disposition, all they want to do is to live their lives in peace and harmony with their neighbors. They're interested in their self-growth, their families, their jobs, their enthusiasms. They don't get involved in politics to enrich themselves. They don't get involved in politics to basically have power over their neighbors. They simply want to live in peace and harmony with their neighbors. So in my estimation, most libertarians, or at least people who identify as libertarians, people who their general philosophical perspective is what I would call libertarian, by and large, they're not inclined to look at politics as a good thing. It might be a necessary thing, a necessary evil, but they don't enjoy participating in politics. And again, if I may if you'll allow me a little digression, one of the things I've noticed, I've been involved in libertarian outreach at a variety of levels, basically since 1983. In Albemarle County, where I have a house where I've been living for several years, it was not unusual for me until fairly recently to participate in the affairs of the local government, to go to county board of supervisor meetings, to watch what was going on, occasionally to speak at the board of supervisor meetings. And one of the things I noticed, particularly at the local level, is that people who I would refer to as part of the takings coalition, people who seem to feel government should be much larger, certainly much larger than we libertarians would countenance, people who want essentially government to be more active in the lives of their neighbors, the lives of all of us. They seem to enjoy politics in a way that libertarians don't. My friend Dean Davison here is wearing, for those of you who can't see him, he is wearing a Real Madrid jersey. He's a soccer player. I was a soccer player. When I played soccer and basketball actively, I would do the hard work of training to play the game. I'd lift weights, I would run, I'd prepare. people on the other side of the ideological fence, people who are, again, in the Takings Coalition, people who embrace a much larger role for government than we would, they seem to be willing to put in the time and effort to prepare for politics in a way that many libertarians just aren't willing to do. Again, most libertarians, in my estimation, don't like politics. And as a result, they're not willing, in many cases, to put in the hard work that if you want to make changes, particularly at the local level, but pretty much at any level, you have to be willing to put in the effort. By the way, Bobby Knight, the famous basketball coach at Indiana University, then went on and did other things. Coach Knight had this interesting line. He said, people talk about the will to win. Do you have the will to win? And Bobby Knight said, everybody's got the will to win. Do you have the will to prepare? Do you have the will to do the hard work? And in many cases, libertarians aren't usually willing, at least from what I've observed, to put in the hard work that's necessary to prepare to win in politics. And again, I can understand that because we, by and large, we don't look at politics as a way of dealing with the major problems of the human condition. So there's a selection bias issue. So bringing us back to the point that Dean and Brian asked me to talk about, I think libertarians on the margin are more likely, if there is an ideological battle, and particularly if it turns nasty, they are more likely to step away from the party because in many cases they didn't really want to get involved in party politics in the first place. And I can use myself as an example. I had the honor of serving as the Libertarian Party's national chair. I was on the LNC, the Libertarian National Committee, for 10 terms. I hate politics. I'd much rather be discussing soccer or beer or good food or music or many of the things that give life joy. I'm involved in politics because I'm hopelessly bourgeois, I'm a creature of duty, and I can't ask other people to work for my liberty if I'm not willing to do it. I can't ask you lovely people to be out there. Oh, by the way, you go out, you work your arses off, you go out and invest your blood, sweat, and tears, your hard-earned wealth to help make me freer. I'll be on the veranda sipping an iced tea while you're out there working really, really hard. I have to be up on the firing line with my brothers and sisters who are working for liberty. But it's not because I like politics. I hate politics. And in fact, Vince Miller, who was founder of Liberty, what's now called Liberty International, it's called Libertarian International when he founded the organization. Vince says there's something about politics that causes the IQ of a lot of bright people to drop precipitously once they get into politics. So I don't like politics at all, but I'm involved. I make this point because many people in the liberty movement, and in the Libertarian Party in particular, they're not as fortunate as I am in terms of having a lot of time. I'm a university professor. The old joke goes, I didn't want to have to work for a living, so I became a university professor. I have time to invest in politics, in the hard work of politics, that most real human beings don't have. And that's particularly true of a lot of libertarians. Well, libertarians are frequently portrayed as, oh, you're just a bunch of rich people. I wish we ain't. Most libertarians I know work for a living, unlike the university professors, of course. They actually work for a living, and they don't have time. Even if they want to go out and be involved in politics, even if they want to do the hard work, in many cases, they just don't have that time. And so there are selection bias problems that I think impact libertarians to a greater extent than other political organizations, particularly more, if you will, more socialist organizations or more statist organizations. Perhaps that would be a better way of saying it. So, by the way, if people disagree with that, they're welcome to, in the question period, they're welcome to challenge my perspective on this. Why does the Libertarian Party continue to exist? Why does the Libertarian Party continue to have a real presence in many locations throughout, not just throughout the United States, but throughout the world? Why is the Libertarian Party still around? We're the third, I think by any reasonable standard, the Libertarian Party is the third largest political party in the United States. Why have we existed? By the way, for those who are watching this, you may not know, the Libertarian Party was founded, or the founding date is usually reckoned as December 11th, 1971. So we've been around for well over 50 years. We actually did have a presidential ticket that won an electoral vote. In fact, our first presidential ticket in 1972 did receive an electoral vote from a renegade Republican elector in Virginia. And so we've been around for quite a while. Why have we been able to do this? In my opinion, it's because, to put it bluntly, perhaps to put it somewhat pretentiously, we're right. Our ideas of individual liberty and personal responsibility, the society that we would like to see, where individuals can live their lives the way they want as long as they don't violate the like rights of their neighbors. I think that this is a better way of looking at things. I think that societies based upon, to the extent that societies are libertarian, that they allow a great deal of individual liberty, but coupled with personal responsibility, these societies are better societies. They're wealthier societies. And I don't mean just wealth in the sense of more automobiles or TV sets or toaster ovens. I mean wealthier in the sense that people are able to pursue their vision, their dreams, their God, as long as they don't violate the like rights of their neighbors. I think that's a truly beautiful vision. It's a vision of love, because we're willing to tell our neighbors, look, I may disagree with you about all manner of things that you want to do in terms of your life, but as long as you don't violate the like rights of your neighbors, you can live your life your way. Now, I may not want to deal with you, but you can live your life your way. I'm not going to hit you over the head with the big stick of the state. It's a vision of love. We're willing to let people live their lives their way. We don't want to stick our noses in their lives. I think the libertarian vision, individual liberty coupled with personal responsibility, as I said, it's a truly beautiful vision. I think ultimately, as time goes by, people will find it a compelling vision. And I think it still excites enough people that they're willing to step forward, even in a political situation where our opponents write the rules of the game. Our opponents get to enforce those rules. And I hope this is not going to surprise you when I say our opponents don't always play fair. They cheat habitually. I think that our compelling vision animates people to step forward. That we have a vision that excites people. Now, you might say, well, does it excite enough people? Well, given our situation now, given that the state at all levels has become extremely large, it's overly large, it's overly intrusive, overly expensive, turning the vessel around, so to speak, moving society in a more libertarian direction, getting people to adopt a libertarian framework, it takes time. Because we've had at least 125 years of a philosophical revolution in very much the other direction. And so I think we are seeing signs, I've certainly seen signs in the world of ideas, again, as a university professor, that libertarian ideas, at least among people who traffic in ideas concerning the proper relationship between the individual and the state, I think we've made tremendous progress. Libertarian ideas, in terms of people who traffic in these ideas, professional idea traffickers, to a much greater extent now than when I was a much younger man, take up libertarian ideas seriously. They don't necessarily like libertarian ideas for various reasons, but our ideas, to a much greater extent, are now being evaluated. And as a matter of fact, people who do not agree with us, to a much greater extent now, seem to feel they have to go out and attack us. We see far more attacks on libertarian ideas, suggestions that come from a libertarian framework about how we can make changes to government our ideas are under much greater attack than they used to be. And I see that as a sign of progress, because if people don't feel your ideas are going to have any salience with respect to the people, they won't have to attack. They don't have to go after you. To the extent that we're making progress, we see people attacking us. And in some cases, they have legitimate questions about how would a libertarian society operate. Reasonable people, by the way, may disagree with just how good a society, a libertarian society, will be. There are questions about how will a libertarian society operate. There are reasonable questions about this. But more and more people are saying the libertarians, while I may not agree with them, they at least have something that we need. They have ideas that we have to grapple with. So I've seen what I consider to be a great deal of progress in terms of the ideological front. The political front, the one where, because this is the Roanoke Valley Libertarians, a political organization. Politics, in my estimation, is a lagging indicator. We see political success after success on these other battlefields. Is one, the intellectual battlefield. I would say the cultural battlefield. I would even say a spiritual battlefield. So right now, given who's in the White House, given who the person currently in the White House, what he replaced in the White House, who replaced the guy who's currently in the White House, who replaced some, given the chain, at least at the top of the pile, the presidency, you might say, well, are libertarians making any progress? I think the answer is yes. But unfortunately, in many cases, it's hard to see that progress. And I'll end my comments with the following. Hopefully you'll find this interesting. One of my favorite novels is The Caine Mutiny by Herman Wood. Of course, it was made into a movie starring Humphrey Bogart. I thought the movie was not very good. The book, I think, is great. At the start of chapter 18, Wook is basically saying, if you were a historian at the start of 1944, looking at history, you would say that to a large extent the Allies were winning the war. Because with the perspective of a historian looking back, you would see that many of the great battles had been fought and had been won. That the Nazis had disastrously, had invaded Russia, they were getting their heads handed to them. The Japanese had expanded vastly too much over territory. The American military and industrial might was really coming to the fore. From a historian's perspective in 1944, things look pretty good. But if you are an ensign on a minesweeper on January 1st, 1944, sailing into Japanese waters, your perspective is going to be completely different. You're about to fight many of the battles that are truly titanic in the history of human affairs, but you won't see them as battles with a capital B. You'll see them, because you're a participant, as nasty welters of activity. You won't be able to see the importance of a battle that you just won. You may have just won a wonderful victory, but you won't know that until a lot of time has passed. You won't know that, perhaps for many years, that you just fought the Battle of Roanoke or the Battle of the Commonwealth of Virginia. It's quite possible that we will look back in 30 years and say, many of the big battles, we won them, but we didn't know we won. We made considerable progress, but we were not in a position to recognize it. So this gives me a lot of hope, combined with the fact that perhaps again, very pretentiously, I think libertarian ideas are just better ideas. That when people have the opportunity to make a fair comparison, apples to apples and not apples to oranges or apples to rocks, of libertarian societies versus the what you might call the feasible alternative arrangements, I think liberty coupled with responsibility will be the preferential option. Now, contrary to rumor, I've been wrong before. So take what I'm saying with the appropriate size grain of salt. But I see a lot of good signs about the long-term progress of the libertarian movement, not just in the United States, but in the world. By the way, some of you may know this, I shall have the honor next week of addressing Liberty International's annual World Conference in Buenos Aires, Argentina. where we've seen a situation where a president of a major country is very libertarian oriented. And actually, from most of the reports I've seen, his actions and the actions of his government have made life better for ordinary citizens in Argentina, that life is getting better for these people by virtue of the fact that they have reduced significantly the size, scope of government in many ways. So while things may sometimes look a little slow and disappointing, discouraging in the United States, we do see some signs of a truly liberal vision, a truly libertarian vision, perhaps taking hold in other parts. So while I'm not getting ready to stand up on a table and start singing, we're winning, we are the champions or anything like that, I do see very good signs, and I hope that those who are watching this will perhaps take a little bit of encouragement from this. And so I'd be happy to answer any questions, to continue comments, and thanks to those of you who I hope that you found this interesting.
We haven't got any comments here. Dane, do you have any questions?
So with the current climate we're in, I know it's one thing we have to worry about, but I think it's more of a comment and also a question. Do you think this will blow over hopefully soon, where we have such a disagreement in the party?
I think there will always be disagreements in ideologically oriented parties, and in fact that I would even say that's appropriate, because how do you move from where we are to a more libertarian society? Well, no one knows that. No one knows what the best way of doing that is. There are clearly some things that I think everyone would agree we ought to do, but no one necessarily knows the best path for that. And so people of honor, integrity, of goodwill will look at the same evidence and they will come to different conclusions. So we will have disagreements. The question is, are those disagreements, first of all, are they, if you will, legitimate disagreements over, say, tactics, strategy? Are they disagreements over actually fundamentals? And this is one of the things that in some cases, the arguments have actually been over fundamentals. I don't know that I would argue that the current issues that have divided the Libertarian National Committee, that divided our national conventions in 2022 and 2024, I don't know that I would say that they were clearly disagreements over fundamentals, but there have certainly been situations where I think there may actually be at heart some real disagreements on what does it mean to be a libertarian. Now, by the way, for those of you listening, it's become something of a joke that there's actually only one real libertarian, and that's me. Everybody says I'm the real libertarian. All these other people are posers. And again, this is not unusual among ideologically oriented people, philosophically oriented people. If what we now have is actually a battle over fundamentals, what does it mean to be a libertarian? What do libertarian principles really mean in the real world? That's a really bad problem. If the arguments are actually just over tactics, strategy, then those things we can deal with. I should also point out that in some cases, maybe the arguments are over neither fundamentals or strategy and tactics. They're purely personal. And unfortunately, I've seen some situations where you see arguments that, I mean, this doesn't seem to have much to do with libertarianism. It actually has to do with the fact that you have people who just don't like each other and perhaps come from different cultures. That's ugly. And I suspect we'll always have a little bit of that. My hope is that people will ultimately focus on what's that wonderful phrase, keep your eyes on the prize. What do we want to achieve? We want to move society in a more libertarian direction. We want to see We want to see the institutions that are suggested by individual liberty and personal responsibility. We want to see those institutions flourish. And if people will keep their eyes on the prize, if they will try, in some cases, just assume the best about your colleagues in the party. Assume if they said something that you disagree with, that this was not because of ill motives or stupidity, or they just don't understand libertarian principles. Try to understand what it is they're saying. Be charitable in your interpretation, and put the moving the ball down the field. Put that at the center of your efforts. There's also, as someone who's a former jock, there's the old expression about there's no I in team. If you focus on what's best for the team, moving the ball down the field, if you don't focus on, oh, by the way, I deserve credit, I'm the person who's responsible for this, it's amazing how much good can be accomplished when people focus on helping the team. So I don't know if that really answers your question. I personally think that what's going on currently at the National Party, I think that this is going to it's going to wash out. And I think we will see more focus in the not too distant future on more of a common vision as to what we want to achieve. Again, I've been wrong before, so it's possible that I'm wrong. I say this, by the way, because the people, and again, I'm referring specifically in this case to the issue of the Mises Caucus came into the National Convention in 2022. They basically swept the elections in terms of the Libertarian National Committee. They had a vision for what they wanted to accomplish. I think by any reasonable measure, they didn't accomplish what they said they were going to accomplish. And I think that there are people, many of the disagreements now, many of the arguments are, look, you guys came forward and said you're going to accomplish these things. Well, you didn't. You didn't accomplish what you wanted to accomplish. But in some cases, by your metrics, you didn't get us where we wanted to go. And so maybe, okay, thanks for trying to move us forward. You didn't do the job. Maybe it's time for other people to step forward and be put in positions of responsibility. So my hope is that a lot of this will wash out. I will point out, by the way, that with respect to the current bitterness that we've seen, a lot of it was personal, at least from what I could tell. It was just people who didn't like each other. Perhaps they had good reasons not to like, but they didn't like each other, and they were not inclined to try to find how can we work together to benefit the team. So, and in some cases, what happens is that just washes out. People who don't like what happened, they're just going to leave. Now, now we have fewer people in the party, but sometimes this just has to happen. A lot of the bad blood just leaves because people who were involved, perhaps people who were instigators or perpetuators of bad blood, they leave, and what's left, perhaps you'll have much more of a team feeling, much more of a team effort. I don't know if that answers your question, but that's
Absolutely. Anybody else have any questions?
You said that the last major split was in 1983. You said that it'll probably wash out.
I'm sorry, excuse me. That's probably the split that people who've been around for a while, that's the one that it really was a big split. It took place at a national convention, and a large part of the motive force in terms of the party, mostly people associated with Ed Crane and people associated with the Cato Institute, they left the party. And it was I think it was over tactics, strategy and tactics. That's the one where you really did have a major part of the, if you will, the institutional knowledge, some of the money that was being contributed, that left. So we've had nasty disagreements subsequently, but I think the thing that you could really say was the major split, or to the extent that the most important, the most consequential, I would put that at 1983. Other people may have a different view of these things.
How long did it take the party to get over it? Because if this is a minor separation, And like that's what bothers me is a lot of these folks when they say, "All right, I'm leaving the party." Well, the libertarians aren't what they used to be. Well, I don't know what that means. Like me and Andy, Dean, yourself, I don't see no difference in our. So it's not like we're trying to change anything. So how long did it take to get it back on track, or did it ever get on track?
Well, that's one could make the one. I'm sure there are people who would make the argument that the LP, in some ways, still hasn't completely recovered because, again, many of the people who left, these were people who were in a position to donate a great deal of money. These were people who had been involved in running campaigns. I mean, you don't like to lose knowledgeable people who actually have record of accomplishment. The Libertarian Party in 1985, my understanding was that there was a question about could we actually keep the lights on at the national office, that the party was in severe financial problem, was in a very bad financial condition in 1985. The convention, the national convention took place, I believe, in Phoenix, and people said, "Look, we've got to put things right," and we did move forward. And in 1987, we nominated Dr. Ron Paul as our presidential candidate. Dr. Paul, of course, former congressperson, so he actually did have some gravitas, if you will, in terms of politics. So I suppose you could make the argument that, at least from 1983, there was a non-trivial recovery to some extent by 87, and then by 1992, and then ultimately by 1996, where we had a very attractive candidate in Harry Brown. There was a lot of national attention to our national convention, which took place in D.C. in 1996. So I think that one could make a reasonable argument that an awful lot of the problems that were caused by the big split, by 1996, things had gotten a lot better. And again, other people might look and say, well, no, the turnaround was, say, the Salt Lake City Convention in 1993 when Steve Dosbach became the national chair, because Steve's very, very good. He helped get us on track on a lot of things. Different people may identify different points in time, but I think that the party certainly had recovered to the point where by 1987 that we could actually run a national campaign and actually get some attention. By the way, for those people who were not around during 87, 88, Dr. Paul gallivanted all across the United States. I mean, he was indefatigable in terms of campaigning, trying to promote the Libertarian Party, and I think he did a great deal of good work that helped us build back up. So that's my perspective. Again, other people may have, they may look at things somewhat differently than I, but that's certainly the way I would view these things.
What has been let me ask, one of the things, we got Elon Musk, he's trying to start his new third party with the American Party. Then you have like Andrew Yang, had Ross Perot, all these rich guys, they came along, they said, we're going to start this major party, or we're going to start another party. What is your thought process of libertarians? Because one of the Mises Caucus ideas was to try to team with the Republican Party. I'm totally against. I've had my throat cut too many times by the major parties, and now I understand like getting behind on like let's say anti-war or or some fight against some issue. That's cool, but I don't like saying, "Hey, we're going to," as our former chair said, Angela McCardle. She said they want to run. This is her statement. They were going to run a presidential candidate in 2028. If the Republican does not give them some type of concession, then they will run the candidate, and if they will drop the candidate out. So immediately, that's like, well, that person shouldn't even get a vote at the national party, at the convention. Well, so what's your thought process of the libertarians when they work with these groups? Should we try to bring? I know they're trying to bring Elon in because he's got X, he's got the money, and God knows, as you said, we need it. And I would like to know who thinks we're rich. Because I've always been told we're crazy anarchists and drug users. So, what's your thought process?
Well, you've actually combined several issues into one question. So allow me, with respect to, for example, I was asked on the radio. In fact, tomorrow I will be on the radio in WINA radio. I'm on the radio every month with Rob Schilling in his program. I offer the libertarian perspective, or at least my libertarian perspective, on a monthly basis on his program, which is a daily program for 2 hours, WINA radio. Someone asked me what were my thoughts about Elon Musk's effort to start a party, and my response was, well, we'll see what ultimately happens. I think he's going to. I think we'll find that. I think he'll find that it's going to be a heck of a lot harder than he might believe. That a lot of people come forward at a given time, and they're dissatisfied with the two older parties, and legitimately so. They should be dissatisfied with the older parties because they basically are driving the ship of state into. They're basically going to ram it into a reef that will probably crush the ship. So they should be dissatisfied, and it's not at all unusual for people to say, "Look, I don't like either of these parties. Let's try something new." But then, when the something new comes along, they'll ultimately have to make a decision: do I vote for the something new, or do I vote for Tweedledum or Tweedledummer, the Democrats and Republicans? And in many cases, they actually turn around and vote for what they had, because what the new party coming forward doesn't really give them what they want. And again, I don't care how much money Elon Musk has. Building a third party in the United States is very, very difficult. Ross Perot made an effort. In fact, I'll mention this story. I don't know that it's true, but I have reason to believe it is. When Ross Perot first ran for president in 1992, my understanding was he did not want to run for president. He wanted to get someone of stature, of substance, someone like maybe Senator Proxmire, to run on a ticket to basically emphasize one of Mr. Perot's major concerns, which was the ship of state with respect to our finances, debt, and the spending. But because of finance laws, campaign finance laws, it was going to be, Mr. Perot could not give enough money to whoever would be running, Bill Proxmire or anyone else. These campaign finance laws essentially made it, he just could not give the sort of money that would ensure that a candidate representing Mr. Perot's views would actually be able to get on the ballot, that would be able to get the sort of attention. However, because of the campaign finance laws, Mr. Perot could spend his own money on his own campaign. And the suggestion is that the reason Ross Perot ran was not because he wanted to, he wanted someone else to do it, but campaign finance laws basically meant that for him to have any chance of making a real impact on the election, he would have to run as the candidate so that he could then spend money. Okay. So I think any effort to build a third party, particularly one that is not based upon clear ideological principles, is going to have a very hard time to do it. And by the way, the Democrats and Republicans are not going to stand around and allow that party to get off the ground easily. Again, our political opponents get to make the rules for us. They get to interpret the rules, and they don't always play fair. So any effort to build a third party, I think, is going to, it's possible for it to succeed. I don't think it's terribly likely. With respect to the issue of our working with one of the legacy parties, Democrats or Republicans, the way I look at this is we should always be willing to listen to an offer but we have to understand what we're all about. And any offer that basically puts us in a position where we say we're not going to do something if you'll do something for us. First of all, is that offer, is it actually enforceable? Because it's, Republicans might say, oh yeah, we'll give you this, you do this, and then they don't do what they've said they're going to do. So the enforceability of any sort of arrangement makes any sort of agreement with Democrats or Republicans somewhat problematic. I also think that it's important, a very important aspect of our effort is education. We are not an educational organization, but a very important aspect of what we do is education. Basically clarifying issues for people, making sure, if nothing else, having a libertarian candidate in a race may make it likely, in fact, I would say usually will make it likely, that important issues will at least be heard. Whether they'll be properly addressed is a different question, but at least people will ask questions. Whether they'll be answered, we can't say. But the presence of a third party, our party, or in some cases other parties, may make sure important questions that the legacy candidates would like to just wave away, we may force them to actually address that. And that can be extremely valuable. So any sort of arrangement that is proposed to us, again, I'm willing to listen. I'm a reasonable person. But let's just say that the offer has to be a damn good one. And I have to have, it cannot force us to compromise our values. And we also, we need to understand that to the extent that we work with other parties, particularly if it's just one of those other parties and not both of the legacy parties, it's very easy for people to say, well, you guys, you're just Republicans, who don't call themselves Republicans, or you're Democrats who don't call themselves Democrats. We have to be very careful that we don't allow people correctly, in some cases, to label us as, well, you're doing the dirty work of these guys we don't like. So I'll listen, but anybody who comes to me with an offer for us to do something that will benefit another political party as well, they're going to have to explain it very carefully, and it's going to have to be something that clearly does benefit the liberty movement. So, okay.
So that kind of rolls into what I actually just want to ask is your thought process on this whole Mike Vermont and his group jumping over to the caucus. I mean, the Republican Party. Do you think there's going to be anything that can be done there?
Well,
I mean,
Dean, you ask an excellent question. First, let me say I didn't know Mike Vermont. I'd never met him until the Virginia convention in 2024. And I didn't really have a chance to chat with him very much until the national convention. And I must say, I liked him. I thought he struck me as a bright fellow, good fellow, articulate, someone who could explain ideas nicely. And ultimately, I did not support him in the nomination battle, but he was someone that I could have been reasonably happy. I was surprised that he chose to go another direction. The way I look at it, look, my crystal ball broke a long time ago. I don't know what the best path for someone else is. I don't even know what the best path for me is in terms of helping us move the ball down the field. I have some ideas, but I'm not sure they're right. When people come to me and say, Jim, what should I do? I say, look, I don't know. You've got to make the decision that you think works best for you. And, it very well may be that someone who is libertarian by any reasonable definition, they may actually be better off in terms of helping the liberty movement. And by the way, just to make it clear, the Libertarian Party is part of the liberty movement. We're there to help build a libertarian society. The Libertarian Party is a tool. It's not, in my opinion, an end in itself. What's good for the Libertarian Party may not, by the way, be good for the liberty movement. we should always keep our eyes focused on how do we build or help move and support a libertarian society. The Libertarian Party is a tool in a toolkit. It's not the goal. The goal is not success of the Libertarian Party. If we have success, hopefully that will help us, but let's keep in mind what we're trying to do. With respect to an individual, it may be that the best thing you can do is actually work through one of the two legacy parties. You might be in a position, because of your stature, because of your influence, you might be in a position to help the Republican Party in a particular locality, particular jurisdiction, particular congressional district, move in a libertarian direction. And if you think your best opportunity is to be in the Republican Party, the Democratic Party, or in the Socialist Party, or no party, you should do it. In fact, you can't be unduly romantic about politics. You have to, if you want to win, if you want to see us move toward a libertarian society, you have to be scrupulously honest with yourself as to how can you help to the greatest degree. And that might be through another party. It might be through having no political activity whatsoever. And if I may use a personal example, when I finished my PhD, I at the time, I actually took a year longer to finish my doctorate because I was involved in so much libertarian stuff, particularly with campus organizing. I probably could have finished a year earlier, which would have been nice because the faculty job market went from horrible to catastrophically bad in that extra year I spent in graduate school. I have often asked myself, would I have helped the liberty movement more by staying out of politics, but by being known as the brilliant scholar who is very good, who, by the way, happens to be a libertarian, and he's working on issues that perhaps do not look like they are political issues, but they actually do have political impact. Would I be more effective if I didn't have a partisan touch? Because there are people who say, oh, that's Jim Lark, the libertarian, as opposed to that's Jim Lark, the brilliant professor, the wonderful guy, who, by the way, happens to be a libertarian. So I've had to ask myself the question: would I be more effective, or would I have been more effective if I had gone in a different direction? Each individual who believes in liberty and responsibility has to ask the question: what can I do that will give us the most impact? And I can't answer that for people. And it very well may be that, again, for some people, the most important thing you can do is stay out of politics. Build your business, create wealth for people, be a good person in your community. Perhaps you're involved in various community activities that help people. And people know, that Brian Heiner, he's out there, he's helping sick children, he's helping clean the streets, he's helping people who need help, and he's a libertarian. You can have an enormous impact through means that are not political. What you have to do is you have to ask yourself, what can you do? The thing that the most important thing I would tell Mike Turnod, if he would ask for my opinion, which he has not, or anybody else who is thinking about acting through in other ways, is you must be scrupulously honest with yourself. If you decide you're going to move to the Republican Party, all right, how would you determine whether you made a good move? In other words, what indices of performance, what metrics would you use to say, yes, this was a good move? How would you determine, was this the right way to go? And be scrupulously honest. If you actually did something and you could say, yes, this is how I made an impact, and I think it would have been, what I did was better than what I could have done under any reasonable alternative arrangement, okay. But don't get involved in another party and then not ask yourself the question, did this work? Because I've seen a lot of people who say, well, the Libertarian Party's not going to work, so they'll go and work through another party. Okay, fair enough. I can't tell you what to do. But did it work? Did you actually achieve what you wanted to achieve? At least at a minimal level. Be scrupulously honest with yourself. And I've seen a lot of people who said, well, the Libertarian Party's not going to have an impact. I better act through these other parties. Well, it doesn't seem like it worked out. And again, I'll come back to a personal experience. I remember in 1980 when Ronald Reagan was the candidate. Reagan sounded very libertarian. Now, he didn't turn out to be as libertarian as he sounded. And you have to ultimately look at the results. But if you look at Reagan's rhetoric compared to Donald Trump's rhetoric, you go 44 years from 1980 to 2024, look at the difference. I mean, Trump, occasionally would say something that, reasonably, and I will give the devil his due. Donald Trump has actually done some good things as president. Of course, he's done so much, it would be impossible for him not to do anything that's good. But if you look at his, the things that the vast majority of libertarians are talking about in terms of moving society in a libertarian direction, a lot of these things, Donald Trump is going completely the opposite direction. If you compare Trump to Reagan, Reagan was much more libertarian sounding. So those people who wanted to get involved in the Republican Party to make it more libertarian, my opinion is that that project has been a failure. Now, of course, they may say, thank God we did this. Look how bad the Republicans would be if we weren't doing it. So I suppose we have to be fair. But I don't think let me rephrase. I think it is very hard for people who've argued for a Republican Liberty Caucus or a Democratic Freedom Caucus or something like that to show real signs of success. Maybe they exist and I don't know about them. And I'm perfectly happy to learn if they have had success. I'll pat them on the back. But I don't think we're going to be that successful by any sort of large movement of libertarians into one of the legacy parties. Again, I've been wrong before, so who knows, maybe I'm wrong here. But I think the evidence is pretty clearly on the side of if we want to have an impact in politics, and again, politics is not the only way of moving society. But I think having a libertarian party that is unambiguously libertarian, that is basically arguing for good values, I think that's extremely important. So, again, other people may look at things differently.
You have a question? All right. Let me see that real quick. So, just real quick, before we wrap up, on August 20th, we're going to come back onto YouTube, and we're going to have a conversation with Lana, Lagia, and she is the vice president of the political affairs for the New Jersey Libertarian Party, and she's the candidate for the New Jersey Assembly District 24. She's going to come on. She's going to discuss New Jersey politics, and she's going to have some insights on the LP's efforts to grow in that region. So we hope that you'll come back on August 20th at 6 p.m. and to hear from that candidate from up there in New Jersey. So I'll turn it back over to Dean real quick, and we'll wrap it up. I guess we have no other questions or anything. We'd like to thank Dr. Lark for his time and coming down here to Roanoke to speak to us as he does every year. It's always appreciated.
Well, allow me to offer my thanks to those people who took their valuable time to listen. I hope that they found it interesting. Incidentally, people who would like to follow up, my faculty email address is jwlark@virginia.edu. Spell out the word Virginia. Again, that's jwlark@virginia.edu. If you'd like to follow up, if you have further questions, please don't hesitate to get in touch with me. And again, thank you for taking your time to listen to me ramble on.
All right. We'd like to thank everybody for watching. Make sure you subscribe, like, and share, and we will talk to you again soon. Thank you, Dr. Lark, for coming out.
Well, that's the end of the show, gang. If you haven't already, please click the subscribe button, the like and share buttons. Follow us on X at We Are Max Lib. And until next time, have a good day. Later.